I felt like talking about the past again. Let's go over some old memories on the Vancouver Canucks prospect core that I don't really know if it's super healthy to actually uncover. Today we're making another video in our What Could Have Been series. A short series on the channel so far, where we take a look at players in the past who were supposed to be great, or who were supposed to be good, or at the very least were supposed to be okay, and who never actually ended up turning out the way that people thought that they would, even in the slightest fashion. Today we're talking about another Vancouver Canucks former prospect who was drafted in the 2013 NHL Entry Draft. Yeah, I know. 3 out of the 4 videos we have done in this series so far have been Vancouver Canucks prospects from that 2013 draft. Started off with Shinkaruk, then we moved over to Castles, then we talked about Kenins, who isn't from that draft, and now we're talking about Jordan Subban, who is from that draft as well. I'm telling you, man, the 2013 draft for the Canucks was when many people thought this franchise had changed. We had so many guys who people thought were going to be good, or not even good, but at the very least NHL players, and the Vancouver Canucks in this draft just ended up pulling off what they pulled off in every other draft the years before. Only one NHL guy in Bo Horvat, despite the fact that all the hype was surrounding everybody else. Shinkaruk, Castles, and now Jordan Subban. And I don't know if it's fair to talk about Jordan Subban like this, because when Jordan Subban was drafted, it was in the 4th round. 4th round guys are not necessarily supposed to be NHL players. That's just usually how it goes. But in the 2013 draft, the Vancouver Canucks drafted Jordan Subban in the 4th round, 115th overall. He was not supposed to go there. Jordan Subban was supposed to go much higher because the only ranking that is actually out there for this player is 54th by future considerations. They thought he was a 2nd round talent. He ended up going 2 rounds later. Jordan Subban in his draft year played for the Belleville Bulls in the OHL, where in 68 games played, he had 51 points. He also had the 2nd most goals and the 2nd most points out of all NHL draft-eligible CHL defenders. He was really good in his draft year. It's awesome to see that. But immediately after Jordan Subban was drafted, there was this really iconic interview that they did with TSN and James Duthie that I think kind of got Vancouver Canucks fans just a little bit too excited. Because Jordan Subban is, obviously, just based off of the name, the younger brother of PK Subban. He is the 3rd out of PK, Malcolm, and then eventually him, and this interview with James Duthie had all 3 of them, and it was a really cool interview. It was funny to watch. I remember it very vividly. It's just, PK Subban said that Jordan Subban was better than PK, and that Jordan would be better than PK, even though PK already had, at that point, a Norris trophy. So what you had here was a 4th round pick who had recently gotten drafted, who one of the best defenders in the entire world was saying, yeah, you know, he's better than I was at 18, he works harder than I was working hard at 18, he's smarter, he is a very different, cerebral kind of player compared to what I was when I was 18. And he even at the end, jokingly, I would assume, insinuated that Jordan Subban may have a few more Norrises than PK by the time their careers were all said and done. So, yeah. Expectations for your 4th round pick in the 2013 draft. Norris caliber. Awesome. And maybe the entire reason this video even exists is because that interview was so iconic, and the sentiment from that interview reigned true in the minds of many Canucks fans, that when people thought about Jordan Subban throughout the years, people thought about the progression, the prospect, the future potential. Everybody always kind of had in the back of their minds, better than PK. Better than PK. He's supposed to be better than PK. And that kind of self-destructed in our faces when Jordan Subban eventually didn't turn out to be PK. And maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself. Maybe I'm diverting too far from the story. Okay, let's continue with the story. Jordan Subban was a guy who, after he got drafted, a lot of Canucks fans were excited to see what he could do next. Because even though his numbers were pretty good, 51 points in 68 games in the OHL, He was one of the best statistical D-men in the CHL that year for the NHL Draft. It's just that, well, he was 5'9" and 174 pounds. He is a small guy. And this is in 2013 here. At this point in time, Johnny Gaudreau hadn't come into the league yet and shown everybody that small players can actually work out. There was a very, very big stigma at the time about small players. And that, honestly, definitely did influence why he went in the 4th round, even though people said he could have gone in the 2nd round, maybe even higher if he was 6'2". But the next few years in the OHL for Jordan Subban didn't really progress in the same way that people thought it would. Mostly because the Belleville Bulls were just bad. They were one of the worst teams in the OHL at this time frame, and as a result, Jordan Subban's point production didn't really grow in the ways that people thought point production from top defensive prospects should grow. 42 points in 66 games, 52 points in 63 games by the time he was 19. Certainly not bad, especially considering the circumstances, but that's what happened. Eventually, he did make his way over to the Utica Comets. He had 36 points in 67 games as a 20-year-old, in his first pro season, mind you. And Canucks fans saw this and they were like, yes, that is great. Point production right there. Cerebral, effective, offensive, puck-moving D-man. Who cares if he's 5'9"? He is a good offensive producer. Take a look at the Dobber report from December of 2015. The guy started off on the 3rd pairing and he had 8 points in his first 13 games. Certainly not bad for a 20-year-old defender. However, throughout his years in the AHL with the Comets, we started to see a little bit of the other qualities that you would really prefer not to see. Some defensive lapses here and there, and some unawareness situations that caused some pretty interesting chances for the other teams. Eventually, in 2017, when Jordan Subban was getting points in the Utica Comets system, he eventually got passed on the depth chart by another right-handed guy who also happened to be 5'9", in Troy Stecher. Stecher eventually won the Vancouver Canucks Defenseman of the Year award that year, and was looking to go up from here. Then, once 2017-2018 rolled around, Jordan Subban had a tough time producing at the same rate that he would before. Compiled with the other issues that did exist within his game, his last season with the Utica Comets, spoiler alert, that's where this story goes, wasn't all too great. He had 16 games played and he had 5 points, which wasn't awesome, especially compared to his previous point production, and eventually he was traded 1-for-1 for Nick Dowd. Yeah, Nick Dowd. Dowd only ended up playing half a season for the Vancouver Canucks and he only had 3 goals. He was really not great. But Jordan Subban, now in a different system, the Ontario Reign Los Angeles Kings system, provided him with a different opportunity to succeed at the rate that people thought he would before. And he wasn't able to find that handle. He had 8 points in 36 games, which is even worse than his point production with the Utica Comets system. And for a defender whose bread and butter was his offensive game, his ability to find the net, his ability to move pucks up ice, it certainly wasn't a good look. Eventually, he was a free agent, and he signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, going back home to the city that he was born and bred from. Eventually, though, he did play with the Toronto Marlies, 18 points in 48 games, still not the same point production that he had before, but it was a step up. But eventually it wasn't enough for the Marlies and the Maple Leafs to actually attend to retaining his rights and signing him again, so he went over to Austria, where he spent the last year of hockey playing for the Dornbirner EC in the EBEL. He had 16 points in 47 games played. And as a guy who is now 25 years old, it really does not look like there is an NHL future for this guy. Now that sucks to hear, because he legitimately did have a ton of potential. If this guy was 6'2", he may not have been drafted in the 4th round, he may have gone in the 1st round in that 2013 draft. But the size, it played an issue. And that physical game that he did not have was not matched well enough by the offensive production, especially into the mid-20s range of his career. So, Jordan Subban was a guy who a lot of Canucks fans are still very fondly remembering when it comes to what he could have been, because PK Subban quite literally said, yeah, you know, I'm a Norris winner, and Jordan Subban's gonna be better than me. And that didn't happen, and now we're taking a look at it 7 years later in a YouTube video like this, kind of just reminiscing and saying, Darn, that 2013 draft, man. At least we got Horvat, but it sucks to see. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Search out Trolls 99. Comment down below what you think about Jordan Subban, the Canucks prospects, this progression, and this story in general. And bye.